Chapter 21, Part 1. Teddy and Ilsa were coming home for a brief 10 days in July. How was it, wondered Emily, that they always came together? That couldn't be just a coincidence. She dreaded the visit and wished it were over. It would be good to see Ilsa again. Somehow, she never could feel a stranger with Ilsa. No matter how long she was away, the moment she came back, you found the old Ilsa. But she did not want to see Teddy. Teddy, who had forgotten her, who had never written since he went away last. Teddy, who was already famous as a painter of lovely women. So famous and so successful that, Ilsa wrote, he was going to give up magazine work. Emily felt a certain relief when she read that. She would no longer dread to open a magazine lest she see her own face, or soul, looking at her out of some illustration, with Frederick Kent scrawled in the corner, as if to say, "Know all men by these presents that this girl is mine." Emily resented less the pictures which looked like her whole face than the ones in which only the eyes were hers. To be able to paint her eyes like that, Teddy must know everything that was in her soul. The thought always filled her with fury and shame, and a sense of horrible helplessness. She would not, could not, tell Teddy to stop using her as a model. She had never stooped to acknowledge to him that she had noticed any resemblance to herself in his illustrations. She never would stoop. And now he was coming home, might be home any time. If only she could go away, on any pretense, for a few weeks. Miss Royal was wanting her to go to New York for a visit. But it would never do to go away when Ilsa was coming. Well, Emily shook herself. What an idiot she was. Teddy was coming home, a dutiful son, to see his mother. And he would doubtless be glad enough to see old friends when their actual presence recalled them to his memory. And why should there be anything difficult about it? She must get rid of this absurd self-consciousness. She would. She was sitting at her open window. The night outside was like a dark, heavy, perfumed flower. An expectant night. A night when things intended to happen. Very still. Only the loveliest of muted sounds. The faintest whisper of trees. The airiest sigh of wind. The half-heard, half-felt moan of the sea. "Oh, beauty," whispered Emily passionately, lifting her hands to the stars. "What would I have done without you all these years?" Beauty of night, and perfume, and mystery. Her soul was filled with it. There was just then room for nothing else. She bent out, lifting her face to the jeweled sky, rapt, ecstatic. Then she heard it. A soft, silvery signal in Lofty John's bush. 2 higher notes and 1 long, low one. The old call, that would once have sent her with flying feet to the shadows of the firs. Emily sat as if turned to stone, her white face framed in the vines that clustered round her window. He was there. Teddy was there, in Lofty John's bush, waiting for her, calling to her as of old, expecting her. Almost she had sprung to her feet. Almost she had run downstairs and out to the shadows, the beautiful perfumed shadows where he was waiting for her. But was he only trying to see if he still had the old power over her? He had gone away 2 years ago, without even a written word of farewell. Would the Murray pride condone that? Would the Murray pride run to meet the man who had held her of so little account? The Murray pride would not. Emily's young face took on lines of stubborn determination in the dim light. She would not go. Let him call as he might. Whistle, and I'll come to you, my lad, indeed. No more of that for Emily Bird Starr. Teddy Kent need not imagine that he could come and go as went the years, and find her meekly waiting to answer his lordly signal. Again the call came. Twice. He was there, so close to her. In a moment, if she liked, she could be beside him, her hands in his eyes looking into hers. Perhaps he had gone away without saying goodbye to her. Emily rose deliberately and lighted her lamp. She sat down at her desk near the window, took up her pen, and fell to writing, or a semblance of writing. Steadily she wrote. Next day she found sheets covered with aimless repetitions of old poems learned in school days. And as she wrote, she listened. Would the call come again, once more? It did not. When she was quite sure it was not coming again, she put out her light and lay down on her bed with her face in the pillow. Pride was quite satisfied. She had shown him she was not to be whistled off and on. Oh, how thankful she felt that she had been firm enough not to go. For which reason, no doubt, her pillow was wet with savage tears. Part 2. He came next night with Ilse in his new car, and there was handshaking and gaiety and laughter. Oh, a great deal of laughter. Ilse was looking radiant, in a big yellow hat trimmed with crimson roses, one of those preposterous hats only Ilse could get away with. How unlike the neglected, almost ragged Ilse of olden days. Yet just as lovable as ever. Nobody could help loving Ilse. Teddy was charming too, with just the right amount of mingled interest and attachment an old resident coming back to childhood's home would naturally feel. Interested in everything and everybody. Oh, yes, indeed, hugely. Ilse tells me you're bringing out a book. Capital. What's it about? Must get a copy. Blairwater quite unchanged. Delightful to come back to a place where time seems to stand still. Emily almost thought she must have dreamed the whistle in Lofty John's bush. But she went for a drive to Priest Pond with him and Ilsa, and made quite a sensation, for cars were still great novelties thereabouts. And they had a merry, delightful time, then and for the few remaining days of their visit. Ilsa had meant to stay 3 weeks, but found she could stay only 5 days. And Teddy, who seemed to be master of his own time, decided to stay no longer, too. And they both came over to say goodbye to Emily, and all went for a farewell moonlit spin, and laughed a great deal. And Ilsa, with a hug, declared that it was just like old times, and Teddy agreed. If only Perry had been round, he amended. I'm sorry not to have seen old Perry. They tell me he is getting on like a house afire. Perry had gone to the coast on business for his firm. Emily bragged a little about him and his success. Teddy Kent need not suppose he was the only one who was arriving. Are his manners any better than they used to be? Asked Ilsa. His manners are good enough for us simple Prince Edward Islanders, said Emily nastily. Oh, well, I admit I never saw him pick his teeth in public, conceded Ilsa. Do you know, with a sly sidelong glance at Teddy, which Emily instantly noticed. Once I fancied myself quite in love with Perry Miller. Lucky Perry, said Teddy, with what seemed a quiet smile of satisfied understanding. Ilsa did not kiss Emily goodbye, but she shook hands very cordially, as did Teddy. Emily was thanking her stars, in genuine earnest this time, that she had not gone to Teddy when he whistled, if he ever had whistled. They drove gaily off down the lane. But when a few moments later Emily turned into New Moon, there were flying footsteps behind her, and she was enveloped in a silken embrace. Emily, darling, goodbye. I love you as much as ever, but everything is so horribly changed, and we can never find the Islands of Enchantment again. I wish I hadn't come home at all, but say you love me and always will. I couldn't bear it if you didn't. Of course I'll always love you, Ilsa. They kissed lingeringly, almost sadly, among the faint cold sweet perfumes of night. Ilsa went down the lane to where Teddy was purring and scintillating for her, or his car was. And Emily went into New Moon, where her 2 old aunts and Cousin Jimmy were waiting for her. I wonder if Ilsa and Teddy will ever be married, said Aunt Laura. It's time Ilsa was settling down, said Aunt Elizabeth. Poor Ilsa, said Cousin Jimmy inexplainably. Part 3. One late, lovely autumn day in November, Emily walked home from the Blairwater post office with a letter from Ilsa and a parcel. She was athrill with an intoxication of excitement that easily passed for happiness. The whole day had been a strangely unreasonably delightful one, of ripe sunshine on the sere hills, faint grape-like bloom on the faraway woods, and a soft blue sky with little wisps of gray cloud like cast-off veils. Emily had wakened in the morning from a dream of Teddy, the dear, friendly Teddy of the old days, and all day she had been haunted by an odd sense of his nearness. It seemed as if his footsteps sounded at her side, and as if she might come upon him suddenly when she rounded a spruce-fringed curve in the red road, or went down into some sunny hollow where the ferns were thick and golden. Find him smiling at her, with no shadow of change between them, the years of exile and alienation forgotten. She had not really thought much about him for a long while. The summer and autumn had been busy. She was hard at work on a new story. Ilsa's letters had been few and scrappy. Why this sudden irrational sense of his nearness? When she got Ilsa's fat letter, she was quite sure there was some news of Teddy in it. But it was the little parcel that was responsible for her excitement. It was stamped with the sign manual of the House of Wareham, and Emily knew what it must hold. Her book. Her Moral of the Rose. She hurried home by the Crosslots Road, the little old road over which the vagabond wandered, and the lover went to his lady, and children to joy, and tired men home. The road that linked up eventually with the pasture field by the Blair Water and the Yesterday Road. Once in the gray-bowed solitude of the Yesterday Road, Emily sat down in a bay of brown bracken and opened her parcel. There lay her book. Her book, spleet new from the publishers. It was a proud, wonderful, thrilling moment. The crest of the Alpine path at last. Emily lifted her shining eyes to the deep blue November sky and saw peak after peak of sunlit azure still towering beyond. Always new heights of aspiration. One could never reach the top, really. But what a moment when one reached a plateau and outlook like this. What a reward for the long years of toil and endeavor, and disappointment and discouragement. But oh, for her unborn cellar of dreams.